Hi everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Chair and today we are going to be reviewing the album Magical Mystery Tour by the Beatles. Now as always, the album is graded in 3 categories: the context behind the creation of the album, the songs themselves on the album, and finally the album cover. But before we get into that, I wanted to take a quick branch off to discuss this series in general and a little update I wanted to provide. As you guys know, I'm going through my 200 collection of vinyls here, and I have a lot to get through, and it takes some time to put these videos together, plus just busy in life. You know, it looks like I get one out round about every 2 weeks. Because of that, I know probably by the time I get to 200, that's probably going to take a long time, and I'll probably have more than 200 records by that point. So instead of saying it's the road to 200 as I've been titling this series, so instead I'm updating the series name to Record Recap, just to go through the records that I have and be able to still add more to the collection as time goes on. And who knows, maybe I'll still do a ranking video. I did one at 150, maybe I'll do one at 250 or 300. That's going to be a long time down the road, so I'm not worried about that, but I wanted to provide that update just going forward in this series. Anyway, let's jump back in the context of the Beatles. In the last couple episodes, we've learned that the Beatles in the mid-60s, as we're moving towards the late 60s, are kind of getting more into the psychedelic music production. After the release of Sgt. Pepper's, which was known as one of the first concept albums, the Beatles were foaming at the mouth in music production and wanted to continue this excess of psychedelic sound. This new album probably being their deepest dive into that sound yet. However, before they got started on the next album in 1967, they wanted to give themselves the summer off to go on vacation and break and kind of recuperate before hitting back in the studio. Unfortunately, at this time, in late August of 1967, their manager, Brian Epstein, passes away, and this is a huge blow to the Beatles. Now, I haven't really talked about Brian in previous episodes, but he was their manager from the very beginning of the Beatles, promoted them to be who they are known as today. His death was extremely impactful, and what I mean by that is in the last episode I said that Sgt. Pepper's was a perfect mix of drugs and direction. Unfortunately, Brian Epstein provided that direction for the Beatles. So with his absence, the drugs go over the top in this album, but the direction is fairly lacking. To provide more evidence to that, the boys made a movie for this album called Magical Mystery Tour, the same title, where they literally are on a bus and they drive around and do random crazy shit. Yeah, that's pretty much it. This album was somewhat of a soundtrack to that. However, the sessions that they were in to make this only resulted in 7 tracks, so a lot of the other songs were just filler tracks, previously released music that they just kind of tacked on the second half of this record. This album to me is really cool because I see it as a climax album. On the front you have the fun, psychedelic, very colorful Beatles that they're just trying to show to the public, but behind the curtain you can start to kind of see the cracks form. The more deep dive into drug usage and the trauma that they just recently incurred in their life is only going to add to more stress and pressure, which will ultimately lead to the White Album and eventually the breakup of the band. So this is kind of the turning point right here, and I think it really does have to go back once again to the death of their manager. So its impact is very, very pivotal. Now, the creation of these tracks are pretty fascinating as always. They were doing very innovative things in the production studio for these tracks. Once again, a follow-up to Sgt. Pepper's. Paul kind of had this idea of doing this fun, colorful, psychedelic album. Once again, the band was taking a little bit more drugs, and they kind of put that in the music, which you can very much tell on the title track. Penny Lane, Strawberry Fields Forever, I'm the Walrus, Blue Jay Way. Pretty much the whole album is kind of sprinkled with this psychedelic goofiness. John's biggest contribution to this album at this point was I'm the Walrus, a lyrical puzzle of sorts, and George's contribution was Blue Jay Way, which to many is overlooked, but to me is one of my favorite George tracks. And then of course Paul gets his ditties in with Your Mother Should Know, The Fool on the Hill, and Hello Goodbye. And then surprisingly, the whole band comes together to make an instrumental called Flying. The second half was mostly music that already came out that they kind of tacked on. Hello Goodbye was a B-side to I Am the Walrus, but then the second half is all previously released singles, which is All You Need Is Love, Strawberry Fields Forever, Penny Lane, and Baby You're a Rich Man. They just kind of added those on there to kind of fill out the full LP. But it does kind of mesh well with the album. I think very obviously, once again, out of the context, I give this a 5 out of 5. Like I said before, with a lot of drugs and no direction, you kind of get this mess and the band is starting to get stressed out, but they're still putting in a lot of new techniques and it results in this kind of creative mess, but I really like that because it shows the stress the band is feeling, which is going to lead to its future albums. So once again, a 5 out of 5 in this category. Moving on to the songs themselves, I really enjoy this psychedelic album. I actually think the Beatles thrive when they are doing this kind of kooky experimental sound. I think that's what most people see the Beatles as. And they really perfected it and did it so well at the time that it's still well known today. The tracks are innovative and fun, like I'm the Walrus, Strawberry, Penny Lane, Fool on the Hill, Hello Goodbye, and All You Need Is Love. Are great tracks for the summer of '68 and the summer of love right around the corner. And like I said before, the George track is a personal favorite of mine. The only tracks I really didn't like would probably be the title track, the instrumental, and Baby You're a Rich Man. None of those really do anything for me. But that is still 8 out of the 11 tracks I do enjoy, giving us a total of a 3.6 out of 5 in this category, which I think is pretty good for the tracks on this album. Finally, we get to the album cover. I think this is a really fun cover. Like I said, it shows off the very colorful access that the Beatles can be. However, I don't see it as iconic as the other albums that we've looked at and more albums that we're going to look at down the line. So I think that this does get a 4 out of 5. It's not perfect and as easily recognizable as the Beatles, but it's still very fun and does add to the idea of what you're getting into when you put on this vinyl. Adding up all the scores, we reach a final score of 12.6 out of 15, which once again is another surprising score on these Beatles episodes. This ranks it just a smidge higher, like 0.03 higher than Rubber Soul, which absolutely shocks me. Before I started these episodes, I believe Rubber Soul was like my second highest rated Beatles album in my head, but now going through this, it's currently at the bottom of the 3 we've looked at so far. It nestles it just shy of being in first place. Sgt. Pepper is still leading the charge for the Beatles albums and in first place overall in the series that we've done so far in these 10 episodes. But give me your thoughts. Do you think Magical Mystery Tour is bad? Do you think Rubber Soul should be in first? Leave those in the comments below. Once again, these are all musical opinions, so I'm excited to see what you think. No hate here, this is just my take on what I like from the Beatles. And I really wonder where this next album is going to land, as the next album we will look at is their follow-up, which is, of course, the White Album by the Beatles, a very stark contrast from Magical Mystery Tour. But it's going to be exciting where I think about these 30 tracks that I'm going to get to, so it'll probably be a longer episode when that comes out. But of course, like, comment, subscribe. Almost to 50 subscribers, we are so close. 50 is a huge milestone and I would love to see it happen. Of course, shout out to all the other creators on this channel, Kai, Liana, Jackie, Claire. Much love to you as always, and we will see you in the next episode.